All right, here is a crazy statistic. Researchers say that pattern hair loss affects over 50% of adults. That is an alarming number, but perhaps what's more alarming is that this statistic only refers to visible degrees of hair loss. That's the kind where we can actually see temple recession, a bald spot, diffuse thinning with the naked eye. So what about cases where hair loss has already started, but we haven't yet noticed it? How early does this process actually begin? And how much hair do we need to lose before we start noticing something is changing up top? Well, that's all coming up. Hi, this is Rob English from Perfect Hair Health, and in today's video, we are going to be discussing the real incidence of pattern hair loss. Is it actually closer to 100%? Well, last month, my team and I published a paper in the scholarly journal CCID touching on this very topic. And the answers, well, they might surprise you. Also, if you're fighting hair loss and you'd like to navigate to the facts, not fiction, about your treatment options, click the link below to sign up for our free 10-day email course on achieving hair regrowth with or without drugs. This is everything I wish I'd known back in 2007 when I was first diagnosed with pattern hair loss, because if I'd had this information up front, I would have saved myself years of wasted time, money, and hair. First, what is pattern hair loss? Well, pattern hair loss, also known as androgenic alopecia, is probably the world's most common hair loss disorder. In fact, it's so common that you really can't walk down a city block without spotting somebody with the condition. In men, it often starts as temple recession or crown thinning. In women, it can start with diffuse thinning. And while pattern hair loss might present and progress differently across individuals, it has a unique histological feature, one that dermatologists use to actually make a diagnosis. And that is hair follicle miniaturization. That's a term to describe the shrinking of hair diameters, such that some hairs look thinner than others. In fact, this is the main way that pattern hair loss progresses, miniaturization. Over time, affected hairs get thinner and thinner and thinner until eventually they barely grow at all. Now, dermatologists, they have this device called a dermatoscope, and it essentially helps them look really, really closely at somebody's scalp to make one of these hair loss diagnoses. And one thing that they're going to look for is called hair diameter diversity. It's basically when nearby hairs one another have different degrees of thickness. Here's a perfect example. You can see that within this 1 centimeter zone, these hairs are thicker, and these hairs, they look a lot thinner. So if a dermatologist looks at your scalp and sees degrees of hair diameter diversity, they'll say that you probably have hair follicle miniaturization, and then you'll probably be diagnosed with pattern hair loss. So what degree of diversity qualifies as a pattern hair loss diagnosis? Well, in the early 2000s, research groups argued that hair diameter diversity greater than 20%, that indicated a diagnosis of pattern hair loss. In other words, if some scalp hairs on your head were 20% thinner than others, then this meant that you probably had androgenic alopecia. But this 20% cutoff, it's not actually a number that's rooted in perfect science. In studies, it was just a number that calibrated well with when researchers compared visual versus histological hair loss diagnoses. In other words, what a dermatologist would diagnose you with just by looking at you across the room versus closely examining your scalp. But here is where things get interesting, because in my private conversations with dermatologists and dermatopathologists, these people that are involved in hair loss research, most of them are very adamant that any degree of hair diameter diversity, well, that this can indicate a pattern hair loss diagnosis. We're talking 10%, 5%, 3%, even 1%, which is fascinating because it ties into the bigger picture, which is this. Researchers also say that most people don't even notice their own hair loss until they've already lost 30 to 50% of their hair. That's right, for the average person, hair loss isn't even cosmetically perceptible until hair density or diameter diversity has decreased by 30%, 40%, 50%. And only at that point do most people catch their reflection in the mirror, notice a change up top, and then ask themselves, wait a second, am I losing hair? And this brings up a critical question. If 50% of adults have cosmetic degrees of pattern hair loss, well then, how many actually have pattern hair loss but don't know it yet? Because that number, it has to be much higher than 50%. Well, we recently published a peer-reviewed paper in CCID, and part of this paper attempted to answer this very question. First, we know that hair follicle miniaturization is in part driven by hormones. We've made other videos on this in the past. And we know that the production of these hormones in men and in women, they tend to dramatically increase during and throughout puberty. So as part of this paper, we interviewed several dermatologists and we asked them a very simple question. For your patients 13 years and older, what percent show any degree of hair diameter diversity? And these are the patients that they've actually done a scalp exam on. Well, every single dermatologist answered the same thing, 100%. That's right, 100% of patients 13 years old and older showed some degree of hair follicle miniaturization. It's just that that degree of miniaturization, well, it's not going to cosmetically present until we see reductions of 30%, 40%, 50%. And that's going to take years, sometimes decades. And why is that? Well, because the process of hair follicle miniaturization, it happens through hair shedding. Genetic, androgenic, and environmental factors determine the degree by which hair follicles miniaturize during any single hair cycle. So some people will see 1% reductions with each hair shed. And so at age 60, they'll have heads of hair like Ronald Reagan or Willem Dafoe. But others, they're going to see reductions of 30% with each hair cycle. And as such, these people are going to need to decide very quickly if they want to start treatment for pattern hair loss. For more information on this, see our video about the hair loss equation. So what does all of this mean? Are we all balding? Are we all screwed? Well, I don't know. That's maybe one way to look at it, but my takeaways actually are a bit different and a little more positive. First, the data we have suggests that we're all in this together. So those people posting photos like this on hair loss forums and then getting laughed out of their own forum thread, we need to give these people a break. If they're noticing increased shedding alongside signs of miniaturization, don't discourage them by saying that they're delusional. Remember, it's far easier to prevent future hair loss than it is to reverse current hair loss. And there's no hard rule saying that we have to wait until 30 to 50% of our hair density is gone before we start pursuing effective treatments. Again, we're better off starting treatments here than at later stages. So remember that. Secondly, if we want to address pattern hair loss, we really need to start thinking about this problem in terms of a two-step equation. Hair shedding that leads to hair follicle miniaturization. For reference, this is the approach that I take with clients inside of our membership community, and it's this exact strategy that allows us to unlock results like this, or this, or this, or this, even in the absence of using finasteride. That's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free to subscribe for more updates because next week we are going to be diving into a few strategies for hair loss reversal outside of the drug model. And again, if you're looking for personalized support and you want to interact one-on-one with me, consider joining our membership community to help pave a path toward hair recovery on your terms, with the drug model or without the drug model. Thank you.